Welcome, everyone, to this week of the Daily Dose. This week, we are talking about stories too dangerous to tell on Sunday morning. We are going to be looking at and uncovering some of the Bible's most obscure, weirdest, strangest stories this week on the Daily Dose. And we're going to sit there and wonder why the heck these stories were even included in the Bible in the first place. I think so often when we read the Bible, we tend to gravitate towards the stories that are like nice and sweet and friendly. And we hear those messages when you hear people like me preach in front of you. We like to tell those nice, sweet, friendly stories. And then we start to maybe get this expectation that when we open the Bible, that we're going to find these religious superheroes that follow God and love everyone they encounter with rainbows and love and butterflies galore. And maybe we get inspired by hearing those messages and it gets us to start reading the Bible. But then when we actually get into the nitty-gritty of reading the Bible, we found that, holy cow, the people in the Bible are a mess. And not just a little bit messy, but like huge messy. And then they get involved and then they make even bigger messes. They make colossal messes. But somehow through all of this messiness over and over again, God still somehow miraculously gets God's work done through these messy people, despite all of their shortcomings and failures. These dangerous Bible stories, they show us how God is completely indiscriminate in who God will use to do God's work. That God uses the last, the least, the lost, and the lowest, and people even worse than that. People that you and I might not even want to hang around with. Today's story, too dangerous for Sunday morning, is people like Ehud. If you haven't heard of Ehud, that's okay, because his story is super obscure in the Bible. And his story is from the book of Judges, chapter 3. And here is the dangerous story of Ehud. You see, the Israelites, they have been overtaken. The Israelites are God's people, and they've been overtaken, and they become subjects in their own land. And they are forced to serve the evil King Eglon of Moab. But they prayed, and they prayed for the Lord to send them a deliverer, for the Lord to send someone who will free them from King Eglon's terrible reign. And so God sends them a deliverer. He sends none other than Ehud. And here's the scandalous thing about Ehud. Ehud is left-handed. Oh, the Bible says this. Now, in that time, and still in parts of the world today, the left hand is considered unclean. It's considered your dirty hand. And then your right hand is considered clean. So left, unclean, right, clean. So this left-handed man is the one that God sends in to deliver the Israelites from the evil King Eglon. Now, this evil king in the Bible, it talks about him being a big, overweight, fat man, which is really hard to do unless you're really greedy because of this tribal living culture. So Ehud, he goes in to see this king. He goes to face him, but here's the thing. He's got his sword on his right thigh. Now, when he would have entered in there, they would have checked his left thigh to see his sword, because if he was right-handed, he would have pulled his sword from his left thigh, but instead, he hides it on his right thigh. So they don't find his sword when he walks in and gets frisked. But aha, these people, as he's going in to see the king, they don't know that he is left-handed. So Ehud, he goes into the king's chambers and he pretends to give this fat King Eglon a gift. And so he plays to the king's ego. He says, "King, I have a secret message for you." And the king, he tells everyone to leave his chambers. So all the guards leave and Ehud leans in. And then he takes his unclean left hand, grabs the sword from his right thigh and kills the king. Dun, dun, dun. But still, as he's leaving, the servants are still just outside the doors. So Ehud, he walks outside of these doors and he tells the servants, this is in the Bible, I'm not making this up. He tells the servants not to bother the king because the king is in the restroom. So they don't. And because they don't bother the king, they don't realize that he is dead, and Ehud escapes, and all of a sudden, dun, 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 the Israelites are freed people, and they remain freed for another 80 years. I mean, can you believe that this story of Ehud is in the Bible, of the left-handed bandit who stabs the king and tells people he's in the bathroom? You can look it up in Judges chapter 3. So what's the point in even telling these stories that are too dangerous to tell on Sunday morning? Friends, I think the point is this. I think that God uses messy people and messy situations over and over and over again. And I think that so often we look at our own messes and our own shortcomings and the way our bodies just don't do the things they want, or things like left-handedness or mental health struggles, or things that we think that God must want to use somebody who's more qualified to do God's will. But yet time and time again throughout the Bible, the messy people are exactly the people that God uses. People like you and people like me. And when you read the Bible, when you get really into it, you won't find religious superheroes who are on fire for God. There may be a couple, but instead, most of the people you'll find are lukewarm at best, barely faithful people who just bumble through life and accidentally end up furthering God's work in the world despite themselves, reminding us that it is not our work, but it's God's work, reminding us that God is faithful always. So join us this week as we tell more stories too dangerous to tell on Sunday morning. We'll pack more strange stories from the Bible that you probably didn't learn in Sunday school. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I'm honored you've spent your time with us. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, I want to invite you to share and subscribe. And if you're joining us on cable access, I'm so honored that you are here. I also want to take this time to invite you to our in-person worship starting Memorial Day weekend. Here at 8 o'clock at the church, we're going to have a traditional worship service. And then at 10 o'clock, we'll have our modern worship service over on the beautiful shores of Lake Carlos at Luther Crest Bible Camp called Calvary at the Lake. That's at 10 o'clock. And if you show up about an hour early, about 9, we'll be happy to feed you brunch as well. We can't wait to see you back in person.
Beautiful Savior, King of creation, Son of God and Son of Man. Truly I love thee, truly I serve thee, light of my soul, my joy, my crown. Beautiful Savior, Lord of the nations, Son